Hey everybody, today I will be briefly introducing version control and specifically Git, and then along with it SourceTree and a small introduction to how you can use the command line as well for Git. So what is version control and why is it important? Version control is one of those things that sounds very, very serious and very complicated. It's not really. Essentially what it is it takes snapshots of a project. It tracks changes that are made in a project, which is very, very useful for when you're working in a group or even when you're working solo. Think about if you've ever began on a project, made some changes to it, and it has made some unforeseen errors in your project or in your code or website or whatever you're building, and then you've had to spend hours and hours trying to track those down. What if you could go back to a time before, some amount of hours or some amount of code before those problems appeared? Probably save you a lot of time, wouldn't it? Yeah, you would have to repeat some of the code that you'd already written, but at least you wouldn't be wasting a lot of time trying to track down those errors. Or better yet, what if you're in a group and you're tasked with creating, let's say the front page of a website, and someone else in your group is tasked with creating, let's say, the login system or something like that. It would be awfully nice if you could track each other's changes as they're being developed instead of having to maybe email the files back and forth or upload them to a server. You could instead just use a version control system and be able to track those changes that they're being made essentially in real time. Well, that's exactly what Git does. Git is a version control software, and it allows you to do exactly what I just described. Now, I will teach you how to use SourceTree, which is a piece of software from this company right here, Atlassian. If you want to find an extremely good guide to using Git through the command line, granted with a Linux-based system, or Unix-based system rather, go to this site right here, atlassian.com/git. It offers a lot of great tutorials on how to get started, and maybe if you're going from another version control system like SVN or something, how to migrate to Git from that version control system. Anyway, this is a wealth of knowledge, and I will put this in the video notes. So very briefly, here's how a Git workflow might work. So let's say you've got your master branch here. You will hear the word branch used a lot. Branch is basically a path of development that is being used. So when Git looks at the changes that are being made on a particular path, it's looking at these branches. The master is automatically created, but you can have any number of other branches that are being made. So in this example, you've got your two main branches being develop and master here. So at this point, develop and master are at the same point because the project has just started, but all of the development is being done on the develop branch. So that's why you see all of these little dots here. These are going to be commits. That's what a saved snapshot of a project is called. It's called a commit. So these are going to be commits here. So you've got this commit here, and then for some reason, there needed to be an additional branch created called new task branch. And then it does whatever it does, whatever needed to be developed on it is developed, and then it's merged, you'll hear that term a lot as well, merged back into the develop branch. So again, you've got both of these branches being created. You've got some commits here. Another branch is created. It's an offshoot, but it pulls all of this code from the develop branch into the new task branch. And then once that code is fixed or created or what have you, it is merged back into the develop branch because, as you can see, there's an additional commit here that isn't in the new task branch. That's something to pay attention to. Development and commits can continue on a branch independent of all the other branches. Now, that's important for when you're working in a group because you may want to be aware that your commits are not the only ones that are going to be made, and that there may be commits that are being made at the same time as yours, prior or after, what have you. So again, you've got this develop branch going on. There's this merge being made. It brings all these changes back in from this new task branch into the develop branch. And then you've eventually got this develop branch being pushed into the launch task branch. And then that is being merged into the master branch at launch day. And then you can look at any of these other diagrams here. But again, the main point being that you can have these several branches and they can have work being done on them independently. You can put them all back together again into this master branch, and then that's the one that most people are, well, that people are going to be using for the central repository. The master branch is typically the branch that you're assuming all the code is working on. So you can use your develop branch, or however you want to name it. You can name these branches anything you want, but you want to make sure that all that code is working prior to being pushed back into the master branch. But again, one of the great things about version control is that even if it isn't, you can roll back to a previous version on that master branch and potentially figure out where the code may have gone wrong. So it saves you a lot of time. As I mentioned, SourceTree is the piece of software that I will be teaching you to use. It is for both Windows and Mac, so just about everyone can use it. Sorry, Linux users, but you're probably going to be using command line anyway, so you will not probably find this very beneficial. So again, you can download this at sourcetreeapp.com. You can go there, click this, and it will download it for your system of choice. I've got running here. I actually have a project up called Game Stats, but let me just point out a few things here. So here is the file system over here, or the file tree. See, I've got some files open, mostly in some different component areas here. And then over here, there's a bit of code that pops up. And this is basically just going to be showing, so you'll see that this is all green here. That's basically showing new content that has been added. So the basic workflow for any sort of Git project is you will create your project. You'll do what's called a git initialize. You'll do a git init, and then you'll write some code or put whatever in your project, and then you'll do an add. You'll add things to your project. That button is up here. I don't have anything to add actually, so when I push it, it's not going to do anything. I will add something later, and then you can see that it will be pushed up. But anything green is something that has been added to the project, and then I will show you anything in red is what's taken away. So you see, I took out some things here out of my project. It wasn't working for me. Who knows why I took it out. But basically, here are some changes. Here's what was added again, and then again, here's what was taken out. Now, this is really beneficial because, again, when you're looking at someone else's code, you can see what they've taken out, what they've added in. If there's any sort of comments, you can see that as well. Something that goes along with these Git commits is a Git commit message, and that is required. The message is required, and it's very, very beneficial. I actually have bad practice when it comes to commit messages. I always tend to put them in the past tense. The best practice for that is putting it in current tense. So instead of saying added git ignore, I should say adds git ignore. And the update with basic HTML is okay to do. This should be updates with Bootstrap CDN. So again, when you're doing your commit messages, just make sure they're there in the present tense, so that when you go back and you're looking at commit messages, okay, you can say, okay, this is what this does, not this is what this did, because again, that tense seems to make a bit of a difference in the messages. So that's just a best practice thing that you're going to want to look at. So what will you do to create a new project with SourceTree? Well, you go up to File up here, New/clone, and then you'll go to New Repository and Create Local Repository. Let me just find a project here. And let's just do this Laravel project I've got here. Okay, and you see that it automatically names the project to whatever the file name is. So I can also create a remote repository at this time if I want to. I'm going to actually go ahead and do it because I don't find local repositories to be that beneficial unless you've got a remote repository as well. Now, this may change as you're working at a company because they may have some sort of local network set up that you can use that at. But I personally don't find it too beneficial without pushing it to a remote repository. So I'm going to do create. And here I have a couple of accounts linked already. I'm going to go ahead and push this to my GitHub account. And you can add these under preferences. And I'm just going to name it Laravel. I'm the owner of it. And this is a basic Laravel project. And it is a private repository. I'm just going to leave it at that. Sorry, guys. And it creates it. And let me see if it created it. Here. And it did not. I think it's because I forgot to push it. Okay. So let me go to, let me actually pull that up real quick. Okay, so here we go. I've got this project. I created it. I added a remote server to it, but I haven't added anything yet. Here, I'll get into workflow. So again, you've got this project created. You may have some files in here, which I do, a lot of files apparently. And I am going to go ahead and add these. Okay, one big thing real quick is the staged versus unstaged. Basically, staged files are those files that are ready to be committed. They're ready to go. And you can pick individual files. Honestly, what I do is I just go ahead and add the entire project again. This makes sense when you have smaller projects. It makes much less sense once you have large projects, some sort of industry-sized project. I wouldn't recommend it then. I would recommend only adding the files that you're specifically working on, and this is where committing often is probably a good thing. That way you're not committing 5, 6, 7 files, 15, 30 files, what have you. You're only committing 1 or 2 files that you've made changes to the entire time. I'm just doing this for sake of demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and stage all of these files, which means they're ready to go ahead and be committed. So I'm going to hit commit. It's going to ask me to put in a little message here, so I'm just going to say initial commit, and I will commit it, and that's my snapshot. So right there, I have my very first snapshot, and you'll see in SourceTree, I've got this initial commit here with a commit number. So these commit numbers are the unique identifiers I was talking about that you can go back to, and you can actually specify these. You can go back to and then pull those up, pull that down, and that will overwrite your local repository if you want. Again, you don't have to do that, but if something goes drastically wrong, you can go ahead and do that. I'm actually going to push these up now. This is the other thing that you'll do. You will push these up, and that will... And we'll push these up to the master branch. If you had several other branches, you could go ahead and push those up to those as you wanted. But since I only have the one, I'm going to go ahead and push it to that. So now that should update my GitHub here. Maybe. No. Oh, here we go. Sorry. All right. So here is my project, complete with the little documentation that came with the Laravel project itself. So it worked. That's a good thing. So now let me show you how you can connect to a repository. So this is important if there's an existing repository and you want to start working on it. This is beneficial again for working in groups. Someone will typically go ahead and set up the repository, and then everyone will pull down some common files to begin working on. So you'll go to File, New/Clone. You'll go to New Repository here and do Clone from URL. And let me just go to, I'm gonna find a random one here. Okay, here we go. So you'll see this little clone URL here in GitHub. Bitbucket has it as well. Bitbucket is basically a version of GitHub, except, or well, it's a hosted Git repository, except all of your files, all of your projects on Bitbucket can be private. On GitHub, you're only allowed, I believe, 3 private projects, and then all the rest of them have to be open. GitHub's nice from the standpoint of it encourages open source projects, but it's not positive from the standpoint of, if you want to keep something private, you've only got so many projects before you're out of those. So again, let me just show you here real quick. You can go to go to the project home here. So up here, the clone is up in the top right, and GitHub, it's going to be right here. I'm going to go ahead and pull this one from GitHub though. Just do copy a clipboard. That, and then I'm going to pick where I'm going to put this. I'm just going to stick it in my sites folder. And I'm going to name this Google Design Icons. And if there were multiple branches, I could change that. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to pull down the master. And I'll do clone. And I won't do clone. I will create a new folder for this. It should be pulling it down. While this clone's down, let me show you real quick. The SourceTree website does have some pretty good frequently asked questions. If you got some things, there's some basic ones here. Adding repositories, viewing differences. So this different views basically just goes over the if you can have log history search type of things. Staging commits, again, I went over that. So if you've got some questions on that, there is some small documentation there for you. I believe there is some better ones, maybe on this Atlassian site, but to be honest, I don't remember for sure. Let me just go back and check on their download here. So, all right, so we've got this Google Design Icons project pulled in, and here's the commit history here. I can go back and look at the changes that were made. Here's something to the README. So anyway, again, you can go through and again look at the commit messages here to see some, how this particular project is doing their commit messages. Let's see if it actually made it onto my computer here. And sure enough, went to the Google Icons folder that I had made. I was mistaken earlier in thinking that it would just have the same name as the cloned project. That's why it wouldn't let me clone it into a non-empty folder. So just be aware of that when you're trying to clone something down. So that's how you would connect to someone else's project if you're looking to do so. So that's kind of the brief overview of what you're going to do for SourceTree. So again, if you're going to create a new project, you go to File, New, Clone, and then you'll do create local repository or create local repository. That will let you set up that local one there if you're the one setting it up. And then your workflow from there will be do some work, add it, commit it, and then when you're ready to push, you can push it. Now, something to be aware of, you can push multiple commits, so you don't need to push after every single commit. When you make a commit, you can you can get right back to work again, do 3 or 4 commits, and then push up a larger chunk. What I tend to do in my personal workflow is I will do commits on small sections and then do pushes for major sections that are connected. So, if I'm doing styling of a particular page, I may do small commits when I get a particular element working, but I may not push that up until I'm finished with the entire page. That just helps a bit with organization, and then making sure that when people do pull down changes. Oh, that was one thing that I forgot to cover. Pulls. Let me do that real quick. So basically what you'll do is for SourceTree, all you're going to do is you're going to hit pull. It will ask you from what repository. You're going to hit origin. Just always leave it at origin. And then for the remote branch, again, you can pick which branch you want to do. Typically, you're going to be pulling from the master branch, as most people are going to be pushing up into that, and that's where all the major changes are going to be. And then you can just hit OK. And if there are changes, it will show you what they are down here. I shouldn't have any changes because, again, I just downloaded this this project. If you need more details, a quick Google search will turn up what you need to do for this. One thing that I'll briefly say, when you run into conflicts in code where there are 2 different changes to the same code, you will have to do something with that. Otherwise, SourceTree will Git itself does not allow you to make another commit until those changes are fixed, basically. Or, well, make another push until those changes are fixed. So if you run into that, a quick Google search will help you fix those. It's a subject that's been written on rather lengthily. Uh, in great length. So go ahead and, again, a quick Google search will fix that for you. I am briefly going to show you how I use command line to do this. If you're a Windows user, you can download Cygwin, which basically gives you Unix-like commands for Windows. I like that. I have a Windows computer that I use occasionally for this, and I want to be using the same commands across all of my machines. So I do use Cygwin on my regular computer, or on my Windows computer, when I'm doing development, for those small times I'm doing development on my Windows machine. Again, I use command line primarily myself. I actually think it's easier to read than SourceTree is. I feel like it's easier to use. Unix is a little bit scary, or command line's a little bit scary for people, just because you hear so many horror stories of, oh, I accidentally deleted this or deleted that. There's only text. There's nothing you can click on per se. You have to know specific commands. The bright side is that there's actually much more documentation for using Git with command line than there is with something like SourceTree or the GitHub app or something like that. So I'm going to make just a couple of changes real quick to this game stats project that we had seen earlier. Just going to add something to the README. This is added for the screencast, and I'll save it. So now I've got this saved on my local system. I'm going to pop over here. I'm actually already in the directory that this is in. You'll see I'm in the game stats directory here. So let me just do a git status, which will check to see if there's any changes to my Git project. And sure enough, it sees that my readme.markdown has had a change to it. So I'm going to git add readme.markdown. I'll add it. Git status again. It should say that it's staged. And in fact, changes to be committed, and that file is added. If you wanted to add a group of files, you could do git add A, and that will add all of the files in the project. You can do git add help, and that will give you all of the flags that you can add in. But again, this is something that you can look at on your own. And actually, this website here, this atlassian.com/git, has some really excellent tips for command line usage. So I would suggest you popping over there again. That is atlassian.com/git, and that will give you a whole bunch of resources. So again, I've added it. I need to commit it, so I'll do git commit, and the flag for a commit message is -m. So I'll go ahead and add my commit message here. Just say adds content for screencast. Okay, and you'll see it says one file changed, 2 insertions. And now I'm ready to push. So I'll do git push origin master. And this basically is saying, hey, push it up to the origin repository in this and the branch master. Okay, and that should have pushed it up. Let me go ahead and take a look and see if in fact it made that change. And it did not. Try this again. Let me take a look and see what SourceTree says. It's actually one of the few times, if I have something like this where I can't figure out why it has started acting the way that it does, then I will typically pop into SourceTree and see if SourceTree can give me any help with it. Let me just go to game stats here. Okay. So I'm in this, I forgot, I did actually create this develop branch here. So git branch. So see, this Git branch asks what branch I'm on. I'm actually on the develop branch right now, so that's why I'm not seeing it in the master. If I were to switch over to my development branch on this right here, which it's not showing me my different branches, which is frustrating. Well, this is a good time to show you Git merge. So this git checkout master basically says, hey, pop over into the master branch. So again, git checkout master switches me over to the master branch. It's the same thing as just clicking on this. And as you'll see now, master is highlighted in dark. And then I will just do git merge develop. And now we should see masters here, and sure enough, this is added for the screencast. Now I can go ahead and push it up. Git push origin master. And there we go. It went ahead and pushed it up into my master branch. If I refresh this, boom, this is added for the screencast. So again, you can do a whole lot of things verbosely in command line that you would be doing that you just kind of take for granted maybe in a GUI interface like SourceTree. Nothing against SourceTree, it's a fantastic piece of software. A lot of people at my work do use it, but I actually just find the command line to be a bit more easy, and it does actually make me pay attention to the files that are being added much more so than SourceTree does. Um, so That's the end of the screencast. I hope that you found some of this information useful. Again, I will be putting links to all of these in the video notes. Thanks.